Hello and welcome to the Talking Crit podcast. So today we have two fireside chats. We have one from with Zak Goins, Scrap Rats, and the second one is James Carpio with Anarchy. These are ZineQuest that are up on Kickstarter. If you like what you hear, please go back them. They need community support. That's what they're here for. Normally, I would not be putting up, two firesides in a day, but we also have two on Tuesday with Frank Tuffler, with the Lair of the Manticore uh, in the morning, and at 8 p.m., Nathan Robert, 13th Fleet. Wednesday, we have Lloyd Metcalf at 11 a.m. We have Talking Crit at 8 p.m. with myself and Bad Mike and Tracy Christopherson talking about Catpocalypse Meow. My God. Two more on Thursday. So, and then again on Friday and Saturday. So there'll be a lot of these fireside chats. Yes, I'm getting your voicemails, and I appreciate them, and we'll address your voicemails when I get a break in the fireside chats. Right now. ZineQuest is hot, and I want to make sure that you get to hear from the creators that are out there. I think that's important. You should hear about their projects in their words because these are good projects. And there's a lot of them out there. So this should help you maybe drill down a bit. All right, folks. I'm going to step away, but just remind you, use your common sense, right? Use your common sense when it comes to COVID. Keep yourself, your loved ones protected by using your common sense. And on that note, let me step away and bring you, dun dun dun, Zak Goins, Scrap Rats. And we're live. Welcome. We have a fireside chat because of the wonderful ZineQuest month that is going on. Today, I have Zak Goins, who has the Scrap Rats Kickstarter, which is based on 5e. And as we were talking before the show, sounds like something that even I could get into and be willing to read about 5e. But Zak, before we start talking about your Kickstarter, how long have you been involved in gaming as a player? And then I'm going to ask you as a content creator. But how long have you been involved in gaming?
I was introduced about a decade ago. I started with Pathfinder.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Big crunchy for me. Although the Pathfinder beginner box was, again, something that was on that level of complete and not so heavy and intimidating. I could read it in a sitting, and I still use the components from that box for other stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had that starter box. I remember when they invited me to play, I said, "Yeah, that sounds cool. I've never played a tabletop game before." They're like, "Well, here, go to this website and just build a character." And they sent me to the D20 PFSRD website, which is like every rule for Pathfinder, every build, every option. And I think I spent like an entire week of afternoon and evenings just trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. And like, oh, there's 30 classes. Okay, let's read each one.
And like, oh my God, yeah,
40 races or whatever it was. And it just became like this, like, I loved it. I love crunch in some of my games. And throwing me off the deep end was probably the best way to get me hooked. So,
well, listen. When I came into gaming, it was AD&D. It wasn't basic, and my GM only had the Dungeon Master's Guide and a short adventure he'd written out. So, and this was back in, oh my God, the early 80s. So at the end of the adventure, back when phone calls cost 10.6 cents just for your first 5 minutes, he had to call a friend at school and find out, you had the player's handbook? Yeah. Listen, I gave him X number of experience points. Did he level up? Because we didn't have a player's handbook. Obviously, I was playing a fighter because, you didn't need to. You just knew that your arm class was, and you did D8 damage, and that was, so I was like, and I was hooked. One solo adventure, and I was like, I need this. I need this now. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then, all right, so you've been gaming for over 10 years, and you came in with Pathfinder, and again, God bless you. That's like being thrown into the deep end, no life preserver, no rings, and you don't know how to swim.
Yeah,
So you
100%.
100%, you did, it was doggy paddle or die.
That's
And
right.
I give you a lot of credit because I was a collector of Pathfinder. All the initial books. I mean, I always had the idea that I would run it and I would read the rules, and they were well written. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong.
Oh
But
yeah.
the gaming groups that I was a part of were either more old schoolish or just like that's way too much to digest. And I will say, in the early Pathfinder days, man, they were putting out material from Paizo because I was on the mailing list that would get every new release. And I swear to God, it's like a year and a half. I had like a shelf and a half full of books. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I'm like an addict of things. It's like being an alcoholic, but not drinking the alcohol, just storing it for a rainy
Yeah.
day.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I
I can
was,
imagine.
yeah. So then I was like, all right, I gotta cancel this because I'm just buying way too much.
Yeah.
So
That was
now
so
to have, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that website was like a blessing and a curse because it kept me from having to, dive in and invest, all the money in the books right from the gate. But then it also was like you have every option at your fingertips
Oh
and you
God,
don't know
yeah.
where to start. Just the feat tree alone in Pathfinder and like learning like, okay, you have to take this feat to get this feat. And then, oh, you need to be this. And these feats are the optimized, like the real feats. And then these are like the feats that nobody takes. It's
Right.
an adventure. Yeah.
And if you take the wrong feat, then you're screwing yourself up at later levels because you won't
Yep.
be able to get, to the pitches. If you want A, you need to do B, C.
Yep.
But if you didn't take C at the right time, D is going to be so far delayed that you'll never get to E. Like
100%.
I actually do remember trying to follow that stuff out and design. See, Pathfinder was the first game that I ever saw, even myself, sitting down going, all right, I haven't even played this character yet, but I'm already trying to figure out what this character will look like at 20th level.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never run a character legitimately past 10th in my gaming career, so why am I mapping out the 20th? But you have high expectations, I guess, and you think you're going to get there.
That's right.
So now... But now Scrap Rats is built off the 5e engine. What
Yeah.
Did you immediately switch to 5e, or was that just a gradual change? I mean, the two systems are not diametrically opposed, but there's a huge gap between the two.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was actually the same gaming group that I started in Pathfinder with. I actually got introduced in college. I played with all my professors at college, and
Nice.
they were, I lovingly refer to them as grognards, and they loved all their older edition stuff, and then they liked Pathfinder. And I remember Mark, who was kind of the de facto DM most of the time, brought to my house a copy of D&D Next. And I think he maybe had pre-ordered the core rulebook for 5e.
Okay.
And he's like, you guys want to play this? It's new. You want to try it? And we're like, hell yeah, let's give it a shot. And we were all hooked. Like as soon as we dove in, we're like, this is cool. And we immediately latched onto it and didn't go back.
So you must have been at the near the end of the D&D Next playtest when they actually. All right, my gaming group, we were in the friends and family part of it.
Oh,
so
cool.
we were in earlier, and so that means that every like 2 weeks or so, you got a new version of the rules that you had to, and you would go from a version of rules that you went, this is cool, to you went, what the fuck? By the way, this is an adult language podcast and live stream. So I was a cop for 20 years. My language is not going to change. But literally, we went like, what the fuck is this? And then you go to the next version and go, all right, this is a little bit what the fuck, but a little bit of what we liked, but it isn't meshing well. And our GM at the time, who put the group together specifically, grabbed the Pathfinder player, grabbed an old school D&D player, grabbed somebody who was a third edition player that never went on to Pathfinder, grabbed the 4E guy.
Oh,
we had
okay.
a group so he wanted to get everybody's feel, because when they were initially putting together what became 5E, the idea was you can sit down an original, a white box player next to a 1E player, next to a 3E player, next to a 4E player, and they'll all be able to play in the same group at the same time, even though they're kind of pulling off the different rules. And I think the rules that we were playing with initially were trying to pull that crap off. They didn't. They really didn't. But the biggest thing in my mind still was the Pathfinder player having a hissy fit because we role played an encounter that he insisted should have required a D20 roll to decide whether or not we persuaded character. And I was just like, oh wow, it's a good thing I only read the rules for Pathfinder, never played it, because that would have been a game killer for me.
Well, you have all these skills, you got to use them, right?
Right, and so now moving back to 5e, because now you've gone from Pathfinder to D&D Next. Now you're playing 5e. What to you really clicked over Pathfinder? I mean, again, they're both building off of the classic D&D rules, but they take them to different extremes. So what was that sweet spot for you over Pathfinder?
I don't know that there really became a sweet spot. I think it was more that it was new and we understood it. It was something that, once we read through the rules and we played a couple games, we're like, oh, this makes perfect sense. And it's not as in depth, but it is intuitive still.
Okay.
And so I don't know, I still have a lot of fondness for Pathfinder. And if somebody wanted to play a Pathfinder game tomorrow, I would be down for it. But 5e became the thing that everybody was doing, and it was the new fad, and we climbed aboard. So
fair enough. I mean, the new shiny is certainly part of gaming. I mean, it's even although I have my feet squarely in old school gaming, a lot of the complaints that we hear in old school gaming is, why do we need another rule set? I mean, aren't there enough? Because the new shiny sells, and sometimes it's a new. It's the rules that with a different twist on it.
Yeah,
maybe you're taking a classic D&D rule set and putting a Call of Cthulhu twist on it, or maybe you're making it into like a Gangbusters twist or a World War II aspect to it. These are all a lot of times people who might want to play a World War II RPG are going to go, oh, wait a second, I haven't played an RPG before. I got to learn a set of rules, and then I got to learn another set of rules that go with it. You don't have just a single offering to give me.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's important, actually, is to have, even if they're building off the same base, to have a self-contained package. Otherwise, you're intimidating not just new players, but players that might be RPG experienced but don't know the rule set. The more books you throw at them, the more pages, I think the more you intimidate them, the more likely they go, maybe I'll pass.
Yeah, the best thing that they could have done, and I've got all these shelves filled with them, but all these starter boxes are at least a step in the right direction towards introducing your game to folks. Just strip down the rules, get rid of a lot of the character creation, and give us a self-contained adventure. It's the best way for a person to learn, by and large, a lot of these bigger systems. So,
I mean, one of the best things I saw introduced in the new generation of gaming was doing away with an initial, shopping experience of going through.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I have players that are like, well, I like this. Like, yeah, you might like it, but I don't like spending a whole session before the game even starts with you picking out. Well, you got all right. I have enough silver pieces left to buy exactly 17 arrows and a quiver. And then I'll have 7 coppers left. No, we don't want to go there. I want what you buy after that first adventure is important. But your first adventure, getting an adventurer's pack, getting a class selection of weapons and armor, letting you choose within the packages, it's fine. And so, as I was mentioning before, even for Swords and Wizardry, when I put together the 4-page breakdown of the Swords and Wizardry rule set, I wanted a rule set that I could sit people down at a convention and say, create your characters, and maybe you've never played these rules before, and you're up and running in 10 to 15 minutes as a table.
Mhm.
'Cause I thought that was important. But the biggest important part of that was removing the fucking shopping experience. As much as some players love it, it doesn't belong at that first session. The first session should be bring you in, get you in, hit the ground running, and show you, especially the new players, why gaming is fun, not why it's like going to Staples.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I think if I remember correctly, my DM early on had a copy of Hero Lab, which was like
Oh
see,
yeah, okay,
yeah, and it would take like 30 minutes to build a character because you had to like do a drop down for each
right.
individual item and like select it all, and then you got to print out and all look nice and fancy. It's like, yeah, just give us a kit, like just a pre-built kit of items that we can then walk out with. It's not worth it.
Yeah, and that is one of the huge time savers. So now we're gonna step over and say you've got your Kickstarter, you got
Yeah,
Scrap Rats, as part of ZineQuest or ZineQuest. I screw up. I say ZineQuest all the time. I'm not sure it's
it's
because
cool.
I mean, I'm gonna blame it on the fact that I'm a New Yorker, but I'm sure the New Yorkers are probably offended by me saying that because. But with ZineQuest, and there are, I had said there were dozens of zines. I've been told that there's probably over 200 right now that
For
are
sure.
and we're only a week into it, so God only knows where we're going to be before
Yeah.
this wraps up. But what inspired you to jump into ZineQuest, and what inspired you? Because Scrap Rats is basically a hack of 5e.
Yeah.
What inspired, and it's a science fiction hack of 5e. So
Hmm.
what inspired you to go that route? Because I like the idea. I'm thrilled by it. But what put you in that direction?
So I started making content for 5e a couple of years ago. I put it up on the DMs Guild and Drive Through RPG. And then at the end of 2019, we did our first Kickstarter, me and some friends. We made a aquatic supplement for 5e full of oceanic creatures and layers and things. And we got hooked. And especially I got hooked on the Kickstarter experience and on the creation experience. So we've done a few Kickstarters since then. I've helped other people create their Kickstarters. And ZineQuest was something that I missed the boat on the last 2 years. I didn't have a product that I was excited about putting out there, but I love the idea of it. And so for 2021, I said, I'm going to have something. And you talk about why Scrap Rats and what was the inspiration for Scrap Rats. Well, I love sci-fi. And I love, especially like the sci-fi of the 70s and 80s and 90s. I love Alien. I love Event Horizon. Anything in that wheelhouse
Right.
gets me going. I love like every Alien movie. I will happily sit down and watch it. It doesn't matter how trashy it gets.
No, they age well. That's what you got to say about good science fiction. It ages well. Certain science fiction. I'll mention like the Traveler RPG, where computers were the sizes of small homes in your ship. Didn't age well.
Yeah.
But Aliens ages very well. It's kind of like I think The Expanse is going to age very well. Yeah. It has that. Can science fiction be timeless? It has that, but it has that feel to it. I got to. Babylon 5 is up on HBO Max. I got to rewatch that series for the first time in probably 20 years and see how well it aged, because I loved it at the time. I don't know if it aged as well. Yeah. But yeah, the alien stuff really was spot on.
Yeah. So I really love that sort of pulpy, horrific sci-fi that's still playing with interesting sci-fi concepts, that hasn't left behind the idea of like the golden age of science fiction, where like we want to explore a concept and we're not afraid to go weird with it. Right. A lot of modern sci-fi is just fantasy dressed up in sci-fi trappings, which is cool, but I like the weirdness of some of this. So Scrap Rats was one part that wanting to write something in that flavor, and one part I was working with a friend of mine on this pared down version of 5e, and we had that kind of at a point where we wanted to reveal it, and then I was looking at something to do with sci-fi, and I'm like, what about these two coming together? And we talk about scrappers in space, and that became Scrap Rats. So.
Well, it's like, I guess, Reese's peanut butter cups, chocolate and peanut butter.
That's right.
And because I look at, all right, Pathfinder. They put out Starfinder, which was, I'm not going to say a half-assed attempt to do science fiction with a classic D&D style rule set, but I don't think it hit on all cylinders because, again, it was I think holding on to its fantasy roots too closely. And a lot of the science fiction RPGs that we do see come out, like you said, a lot of times are fantasy with science fiction trappings. Star Wars is a great universe, but it really is the Force. I mean, it is fantasy, just changing the trappings.
Exactly. That, and Starfinder is very much the same way, like you said. And really what I determined was that, at least for me, that leveling and becoming a character with even 30 hit points was a big part of what starts moving you away from what I love about sci-fi and into a more fantasy angle. When your character can take 30 hits, we're no longer in my ideal sci-fi universe. Now we're in Star Wars or something else, which I still love, but it's not the same.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to see people leaping 30 feet and fighting off hordes.
Mm-hmm. And so Scrap Rats and the build for it was, what if we never let you level up in 5th edition? So the rule set is called Commoner Core, is what we
nice.
built. And the idea is like, what if you never took that first class, that first level in that first class, and you were a commoner and you have skills and you have a few other things and you can still pick up proficiencies along the way and you can still make money, but you're just an average person. You're just an average spacer. You're not a hero. You're not, one of the greats. You're just a scrap rat. And you're just trying to, make it a few bucks, make a few credits to get you through to the next week. And the veterans are people who have, ducked and dodged and finagled their way through a handful of adventures and lived to tell about it.
See, that's really, I like that, because even when with my gaming, I find that even with the old school games, somewhere around 7th level is the sweet spot, because you go, and even that is like heroic play, but once you get beyond that, the characters get so powerful that it's hard to balance or even write adventures for them, because either you're going to overcompensate for that power and have a TPK, or everything's going to be so underpowered they're going to wade through it, and you lose that sweetness. There is a certain sweetness about those initial levels of play where death lies around the corner.
Exactly.
And you don't have that tension at higher levels. And when you do, your players get pissed off at you because you killed their 10th level wizard that they spent a year and a half, leveling up, and you're an asshole. But when all the characters are literally a step away from death, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I find it. I'm already 100% behind Scrap Rats. I'm a backer, but I'd love to see this converted to like a myth, like Cthulhu Mythos type of presentation. I think that really, because that's another thing that's hard to do with D20, because once you start leveling up, then the horrors become much less horrible.
Exactly. We actually we built Commoner Core And we put Scrap Rats together for it, and we also reached out to a couple other creators that we knew that were working on different projects for 5e, and we asked them if they would be interested. And there's another Kickstarter coming on the 13th, another ZineQuest called The Lights of Winthrop Manor, and it is a fantasy horror like haunted house using the Commoner Core rule set.
Nice. All right, so there. Great minds do certainly think alike, because I think that is certainly what it's built for. I mean, that is spot on.
Yeah, it's, there's definitely, like, listen, I'll hear an argument all day that, like, there's already awesome, like you said, like Cthulhu systems. Like Call of Cthulhu is amazing, and it does this, what we're trying to do in some ways, it does that very, very well, as far as showing the characters who are always very close to death.
Right.
That being said, my argument for our system, and my argument for why ours is going to be a lot of fun, is that there is a lot of people coming in to 5e right now, or coming into this hobby via streams of 5e at the very least.
Right.
And the rules that they're at least tangentially familiar with is the 5th edition rule set. And they're more likely to dip their toe in something with that branding than something that sounds like a whole new system. So our hope is that we can kind of use the brand of 5e to bring in that crowd and introduce them to a whole new style of play that you wouldn't get in a regular D&D experience.
Well, that is a really good way to approach it. I'm, and we talked about stuff except before we started the episode. But this to me, obviously, we didn't discuss this aspect, the Common Core, because I would have been all over that, like white on rice. Man, this is cool, because as an old school gamer, that hits my sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we said it's a big thing amongst gamers, the discussion of when is the best gameplay? Is it high level, low? High level is great because you can say, yes, I got there. But low level is where the tension is. Low level is where when you survive, you feel like you accomplished something.
Yep.
Whereas when you get to the higher levels, it's just like, hey, I got in there, ring the bell, take the loot.
Here's the cool thing, right?
Let's go.
Here's the cool thing that we wanted, because I agree with you. I'm 100% on board for low levels are the best levels. That being said, we kind of wanted to we wanted to recognize two things. First off, a 0 level character in 5th edition is likely to die. We'll put it that way.
Right.
And so we wanted to build in some parameters to help with that a little bit. So we built a luck system, and the luck system isn't like Call of Cthulhu or anything like that, where it recharges very quickly. Mothership has a great luck system. I think it's Mothership that has a great luck system. Cyberpunk has a great luck system. But all of those recharge pretty quickly once, like maybe every session or so. And Scrap Rats, luck recharges very slowly. But you start off with enough of it to where you can probably get through your first or second adventure if you play your cards right without dying. But going on from that, it's going to get iffy. So we wanted to offer that as a way of letting you not just die right out the gate every single time, but we also built in a way for you to pick up little tiny bonuses and advantages and little fun things, proficiencies along the way, staying at level 0. But at the end of the day, the other side of it is we wanted to build a system that if you said, we've played 4 rounds of Scrap Rats, 4 adventures of Scrap Rats, but now we want to play in, let's say, the 5e sci-fi larger game called Dark Matter. That's made by, oh goodness, I'm going to forget the company, but they're cool. Anyhow, if you want to take your Scrap Rats characters and take a class level and dive into Dark Matter, you can absolutely do that. All the rules still work.
Nice.
So there's an option there where we're not contradicting what it is. And our statement is that, at the beginning, you need luck to survive, but given long enough, you need skill sets to survive.
Right.
And so luck is for Scrap Rats, and skills and abilities are for veteran characters who are ready to take class levels and move on out, if that's what you want to do. Or you stay in Scrap Rats and you make the game about how far can I push this character and survive, how many scenarios can we work our way through, and this have a character that makes it all the way, right?
Push your luck, yeah.
That's a fun game for me. Like, can I make it through 6 scenarios with the same character? This guy beating the odds every single time. He's out of luck now, and yet somehow he's managing to make it through and come out with a payday.
And that's a game that is perfect for convention play.
Yeah,
that really. And we were discussing before we went live about 2020 and how crappy. I went to TotalCon last February, and it was the last and only convention I went to in 2020. I was lucky enough to get an upper respiratory infection. I don't blame the con. It was just it's February, and then it turned into pneumonia. So I could almost call it con crud, but I'm not going to. But that was the last convention that I went to, and I can't believe it's already a year.
Oh yeah.
And next week they're going to be virtual. I'll be doing live streams with my usual live stream partner, Bad Mike, for like 4 nights of the con with some special guests. But it's not the same as being at the convention.
Yep.
So things like this, which really, Scrap Rat seems like it's something that could be built as a perfect pickup game.
Yep.
You don't need much to run with it. Now, how long is the zine?
Right now it's sitting at 40 pages. I think that by the end of it, it'll probably be closer to 50. But it's like a tight rule set. You get I think 4 scenarios come with it. So there's 4 different missions for you to take on. And it's got all the rules in there for, the races that you get to pick from, backgrounds, and then there's even some monsters in the back. So you don't need anything else. You just need this book and you're good to go.
Now, I was reading on the Kickstarter page that it's basically 90% written except for like stretch goals.
Yep.
And some of those stretch goals include a content possibly from backers to some extent. So, I mean, that to me is huge. I've been following I always have to look over my shoulder, make sure my wife is working from home, make sure she's not in the room. I've got 450 Kickstarters I've backed over the 10 years I've been backing Kickstarters. So that's almost one a week for 10 years. Way too fucking many. And ZineQuest, I already busted through my $250 budget that I said, how many zines could I back that $250 won't get me through it? And I went, not even 2 days worth. Not even a weekend, and I'm already well past that. And you look at it and you're like, damn, holy crap! It's just an amazing thing that's been going on.
Oh my gosh,
And of course I lost my train of thought in the midst of this. I hate to admit that. But
we were talking about the size of the book, and that's going to be backer content. Yeah.
But not only that, okay, now I've backed well over 450 Kickstarters, and I've been an individual to certainly call out the Ken Whitmans and the Gareth Sharkers of the world, and the Joshua Frosts, who fail to deliver on what you've paid for. And usually it's because they have a great idea and had nothing written. But you have 90% already ready to go and done, and you've successfully kickstarted before. And that to me, it's like if you're gonna vet a project, yours is the type of project that I'd not just looking at and going, wow, this is a great rule set, and it's a concept that I can really dig, but I got to take a gamble. It's a great concept. It's a rule set that I'm comfortable with, and it's somebody with a proven background and it's already 90% of the way complete with the written material.
Yeah. Yeah, it was it's something that I learned with our first Kickstarter project. We had about 60% written before Oceanic Depths, and that after the Kickstarter's over, you have this crash, at least in my opinion, you have this crash of like you've had all this energy you put forth to marketing and to promoting and to putting yourself out there, and you end it and you're like, oh my gosh, all right, let's deliver this thing. And it's so much, we found that that last 40% we delivered on time. We got Oceanic out, but that last 40% was so much harder after that crash. And so our kind of commitment from there on out was we're going to have it 90% or 100% done before we launch anything from here on out. And that's going to make the backers feel better. It's going to make us feel better because it's done. And then our next commitment became, okay, so now we're hitting those, and we delivered a zine, a 56-page zine called Motherload last year, and we delivered it in like a month after the Kickstarter wrapped up. And we said, well, I think we can even do better than that sometimes. So we pre-bought art for the next project, and we did a product of dragons back in September, and we delivered it in 2 weeks after the Kickstarter wrapped up. So we're always trying to acknowledge the fact that we're treating this like a business. When we put something on there, we want to show that we're professional, that we're making quality stuff, and that we're going to deliver on time. And then we want to show appreciation to our backers because, quite honestly, like these print runs are expensive, and they can't, or at least can't be. And you are helping us without having a product in your hand. You can go down to your game store, right, and buy a book off the shelf, hold it in your hand, take it up to the cash register, and buy it, and know that you're walking out the store with it. Every person that backs something on Kickstarter is taking a risk. We want to acknowledge that risk by giving discounts, by giving exclusives, and by being consistent in delivering. Kickstarter deserves to be a platform that you can trust, in my opinion.
Well, you have Steve George in the comments. I've been amazed at how quickly Zach gets his finished product out once the Kickstarter is done.
Thank you, Steve. Yep, it's been different projects have different timelines. Scrap Rats we're going to deliver in a couple months. I think we said June. It's almost certainly going to be April. But we're gonna promise something, and we're gonna hopefully over deliver. Right.
That's the way it should be.
Yep. Even June, like that's a pretty quick turnaround as far as I can tell. But when it's 90% done, we've already ordered like almost all the art. A lot of the art is in for it. It just really needs to be final editing, putting in the backer created content, and handing it off to layout, and we're off to the printer. So,
wow, that's spot on. Well, again, I'm excited to see this because this is something I could see myself enjoy running. And I don't say that about much stuff, especially stuff that isn't that stuff that's 5e engined. I had said earlier, Myth Arthur is a game that I could see myself investing enough time to run it. The setting, even the rule system is at a point where I feel comfortable with it, but I can't say that for 5e in general. Mm-hmm. But this looks like something that I could have a blast running it. And as we talked about, I run games at conventions.
Yep.
This is something I would have a blast running at a convention. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. The play test for this, we talk about it in the Kickstarter some, but we talk about the themes or the mood that you can get out of this one. And the play test, you definitely get this gambit, right? Anytime you sit down at a table, especially with people that and you're among friends, there's going to be some comedy mixed in. Yeah. And Scrap Rats plays well into that. If you want it to be this like dark comedy where, you're in over your heads and it, and you want to lean into that, it can get really, really bizarre and quirky. And we've had some playtests where that happened, and it's a riot. That being said, like if you want to lean into that horror, like that's also something that's very hard to do in a lot of convention games. and a lot of systems in general is evoke the true horror and suspense consistently. And I think that Scrap Rats can get you there if your party is willing to invest in that aesthetic, right?
Well, that's good.
If you're willing to say, I want this character to live, I need this character to live, that's the goal here, then I think this becomes more of a horror game.
Right.
If you're like, nope, I'll just make another one next time, then it's probably pulpy action comedy, and that's cool too. Like, there's plenty of room for that.
Damn straight, man. That's so. Now, how much is it if the folks want to grab it on Kickstarter?
So our basic tier for PDF is $7, and our full-on tier that gets you the physical zine is $15.
That's like I said, my budget is long. So I'm not even going to pretend to stay within the budget. I'll just let I'll tell my wife to buy more perfume to make herself feel better. As I spend way too much money on zines this time around. Holy crap!
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Well, I'll also mention, because people, if they hop on, they'll see we had some exclusives. And if you look right now, all those exclusives, I believe, are sold out. We did some things where you could help us name artifacts and kind of come up with concepts for artifacts in the game, which are basically magic items. But in Scrap Rats, we imagine that an artifact should be way more powerful than you really should reasonably have. So some of these magic items, some of these artifacts are like, should you use them? Almost certainly not. But the temptation is going to be there, and that should add that fun aspect to it. It's Alien. It's you going up to the egg, knowing that you should not touch the egg, but maybe you go ahead and touch the egg anyway.
Boon, curse, or both. We shall soon find out. That's the way I believe significant magic items should always be. If there isn't a cost, attached to it, then really,
yeah,
it's generally it's unbalancing. That's when you return to my early days of gaming when I gave out artifacts from the 1E books all the time, because everybody wants a hand and eye of Vecna. Just poke your eye out and cut your hand off.
Yeah. So all the like exclusives that we had listed there are sold out, but we're trying to do something fun, and I think we're going to release another one tomorrow. So your listeners will have a little heads up here. We're releasing one-off exclusives all throughout the Kickstarter at new tiers. So if folks want to try to slip in and grab an exclusive that didn't see us on day one, there's still options for that if you keep your eyes out. So
very nice. I like that idea.
Yeah.
That's good. Now I'm going to ask you a question that the Commoner Core, do you have further plans for it? Do you have something coming up? Nothing set in stone, but what are your plans, possibly going forward with this?
Well, so that's interesting. We our kind of mindset with it was, I want to get these zines out to people, and I want people to get their hands on Scrap Rats and Winthrop Manor. And if another one comes out, that's great too. And I want to hear from folks about what they think about it in mass. And so we kind of are holding off Commoner Core at the moment, but I will say that our true intention is sooner rather than later to release the Commoner Core rule set for free, and anybody that wants you can use it. And then we will develop it as a probably a zine exclusive thing where, like, yeah, you want to play, like you said, you want to play in the Cthulhu mythos, we've got a little zine for that, or somebody else has a zine for that, and we want to support that creator's pitch on Commoner Core. I'd love to see a whole line of products in different genres all using it, all like taking the massive amount of 5e players that are coming in and saying, come play in these other genres, and let's use these products as a way to like give you the half step forward into playing in, the Alien RPG or whatever else you want to play in.
Yeah, you can do Swords and Planets, Swords and Sorcery. You can evoke Conan or Cole or Solomon Kane type stuff. There's because a lot of this stuff works best when death is around the corner.
Yep.
Standard, our classic fiction, you always had significant characters usually had an opportunity to die. You weren't always sure. They were put in precarious situations where maybe luck got them through it less than skill.
Yeah.
And I like this.
Yeah.
I'm psyched.
Oh man, it really, like, to me, from the art to the attitude, this product is something that I absolutely am in love with. It's right up in my wheelhouse. I write a lot of different things. I love writing all of them, but this one has got its hooks into me, and I cannot wait to start sending it out to people. So, yeah.
Well, count me in as one of those people who cannot wait to receive it. I've said it before. I think that ZineQuest is going to turn into year-round Christmas, because it's going to be like you're going to be going to your mailbox going, "What came today? Did anything come today?"
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be back in so many of these. Holy crap!
Yeah.
Well, Zach, thank you, man.
Yeah, I have a little teaser, if you don't mind me doing a little teaser
please do
for
a
you
teaser,
and your
please.
listeners. So I'll go ahead and say that if folks head over to Bite Size Gaming on like Facebook and things, they can, or if you just go to our Kickstarter, we're tied in with several other projects. We mentioned one of them on here, Winthrop Manor. So you can check out those upcoming ones. All of them are awesome, and I love all those creators. They're amazing people. But I have a super secret second zine that is going to, cross your fingers, launch at the end of this month. And I haven't done any promotion about it. I'm going to drop it on folks, so you're probably going to be the only people I mention it to before it launches. But it's called Siege, and it is a fold-out zine. It's going to be 4.5 by 6, fold out to 12 by 18.
Oh, okay.
And it comes in acrylic, like, think of, those like top loader cases,
right,
that you put a trading cards in or whatever. It comes in an oversized one of those. And Siege is a simple set of modular rules that you can plop onto any fantasy game, and it helps you run a defense style scenario, right? Like if you want to, Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings, right? There's a rule set in there to give you some really, really fun mechanics for how to turn that into a more epic feel and having a lot of moving parts, but nothing gets overly complicated. It uses the Pandemic board game as an inspiration to kind of bring in some of that idea and get crazy. And on the back side of it, so you have all the rules, you fold it out, it looks like a book. And as you open the book and kind of unfold it, you read the rule set for it. Then it folds out further and you read this. There's a scenario that you get as part of it to show off the rules. And then when you finally finish folding it out, the back side of the whole thing is the gridded map for you to run the scenario on of Siege. So it's going to be a weird, funky product that I'm kind of excited about.
Nice. Well, here, I'm going to ask you then, when it releases, ping me on Facebook, because I'd like to cover it on tankhouse.tavern.com on the blog side.
Cool.
Because that looks really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
I'll send you, I've got a little, like a little GIF that shows how it unfolds and how it looks as you unfold it and see the product. So I'll send you that as a little preview.
Oh, definitely.
So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be $5, and I'm excited to get that, to get something funky out there. Scrap Rats wasn't funky enough.
No, that sounds awesome. Well, again, Zach, thank you so much, man. Taking time out of your morning to join me, join our listeners. Folks, Scrap Rats, do a search on Kickstarter for it. Back it. It looks really good. I'll be doing another live stream today at 7 p.m. Right. I will have James Carpio, and we have 2 more live streams tomorrow.
Wow.
So yeah, when I made the offer in the RPG Zine community, I said, hey, I'd love to interview people on the live stream, or not even interview, do Fireside Chats, because this is an interview. It's 2 people sitting at the bar talking shit. And I was expecting, we'll get a half dozen takers. I have every day is either. My wife said it's only double booking if it's the same time and the same day. I have 2 live streams booked on the same day, three times this week.
Yeah.
Which I find amazing. Every day through Saturday has something going on.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and there are people that aren't launching till later in the month that I have to actually put on a schedule. The response has been great. The folks, if you're listening, whether it's on the podcast or if you're listening on YouTube or Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com, Eric Tenkar. Well, it's / Eric Tenkar, because this way you'll get notified when these live streams are going up. You can participate. There's nothing more fun than having live streams. Well, unless you're David Thompson, I like these live streams. They are on during my daytime instead of 3 a.m. Yes, David. David's one of the regulars. He's out in the beautiful UK. Yes, I do these live streams day or night, depends on the schedule. Not of my schedule. Again, I'm retired. But the people that I have available, what works generally best for them. So again, thank you. And I'll be back tonight, and we'll have updates on Zak's next project when it launches.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Eric.
Oh, thank you. Folks, tonight, laters.
See you later.
Now on to James Carpio. I've known James for a number of years. He actually ran me through a session of Swords and Wizardry Light a couple of years back. The only chance I got to actually play in a session of the game I wrote. So, James, thank you. And folks, I present to you James Carpio. We are live. Welcome to a fireside chat with James Carpio. He has the Anarchy Zine. I've known James for a number of years, so we're going to probably go off the beaten path with some of the topics we're going to hit. James, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
No, it's a good time. I've been, as I mentioned before we stepped into this, I've been doing a large number of fireside chats because of ZineQuest. Did I pronounce that right? Because I have this issue. I always want to say Zine because it's ZineQuest. It is ZineQuest. I always want to say Zine because of magazine, and it's a real mental hiccup I can't get past. All right, magazines, ZineQuest. There we go. There are, I was told, somewhere over 200 zines currently in ZineQuest 3.
Wow, that's quite a lot, actually.
Yes, and we're only at the 8th of the month, so I guess we have another 3 weeks to have people add to it. And just as a side note, I budgeted $250 for my ZineQuest backing, and I busted through that number, I think, on the 4th. So now I'm just kind of like, if I like it, I'll back it, and I'll worry about it later. That's what credit cards are for, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, so far I think I've only backed one at this point, which was actually in something you posted that just caught my eye, and I immediately went and backed it, which was like Cat Apocalypse or something.
Oh yeah, Casey. I'll have Casey on Wednesday night with his daughter, Ainsley. Yeah, no, that looks bizarrely good.
Yeah, the cover sold me. I was like, all right, this, and again, I think anything with cat in it, I end up buying. So Cat Thulu, I ended up buying.
Okay.
So I think the word cat and a cute or awesome looking cat picture on the cover will usually get my money. So just anyone out there listening, you want to make money off of me, you want my wallet open, publish something with cats and RPGs, and you got me.
Yeah, it's now it's funny. If I was doing this last year, our old cat Ashley, we had to have shortly at the end of the year, back in October, we had to have her put to sleep because she had cancer, but she was 15. But God bless her. And the same day, literally the day after, we had a stray cat that we had, young girl, that we had been feeding outside. She always came up for attention. She decides to walk into the house. It's like she knew. And my parents have 2 cats downstairs. We had to keep them to the side. and now she's perched to my left on her yes, hi baby, on her little cat home. So it's one thing. It's one thing. I've always been a cat person. It's the first time a cat chose me and said, "You know what? You might be good enough for me to leave the streets." Because she had a home before. She wants to escape from somebody. But yeah, maybe you and your wife, maybe you're good enough people that I'll make the sacrifice of coming off the streets and into this warm house right before wintertime. Oh my God, talk about timing. But so James, is this your first Kickstarter that you're running for yourself?
No, actually, this will be my third. So the first one was back in 2012. I went to publish a game called Spooky Beans, which was kind of a.
I remember that. Oh my God, that.
Yeah,
right.
I was a big fan of like Roman Dirge's comics, Serena Valentino, a big fan of Invader Zim. So me and my friend Ben Morgan decided to put together a role-playing game kind of inspired by that genre. Unfortunately, as much as like we put into it, it was our first Kickstarter. We didn't quite understand how all the bells and whistles worked, and it never funded. We ended up actually just publishing it ourselves through IPR, Indie Press Revolution.
I remember IPR. I used to shop there a lot. Early Spirit of the Century and other stuff was up there. Like, yes, back when I was buying indie games until I realized I had too many fucking games.
And then the second one was in 2012 or 13 when I published Tales from the Fallen Empire for Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Okay, that's right. That one I have proudly on my shelf. It's a great setting for those folks who have not gotten a chance to look at it. But my gaming group at the time, I think they got through 3 sessions with DCC before saying they liked the scenarios but didn't like the system, and I was like, "Fuck!" So never got to use the setting, but it is a good one, and it's one of the few really swords and sorcery field settings for the DCC game. Well, for Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerer's Hyperborea is one for the OSR, but you did really well for that, and that was also at the beginning of the DCC RPG. So you hit your mark on that. I got to say, you did great.
Yeah, and but again, lessons learned with Kickstarter is that so that time I had just started, like I had an early manuscript when I ran the Kickstarter, and I think after that I really learned my lesson in making sure that things are just a little bit more fleshed out before you run your Kickstarter, because then you run into the the Far West scenario where it's just kind of like
Far West is in a world of its own. I mean, there aren't too many people that can actually say after 9 years, yeah, it's still coming, but I'm writing it in tweets because that's just, I can't get beyond 172 characters at a shot or whatever the tweet limit is now, I guess. That's a unique situation.
Yeah, it's but anyway, just going back to that, it's again a lesson learned is that when you kickstart something, just kind of make sure you have something a little bit more fleshed out before pulling that trigger. Because then I spent like another close to a year just kind of at that point sweating, because while actually I had all the artwork in, the layout was all ready to go. It was just the writing that fell behind, and that's what kept it, from hitting like the actual deadline after it funded. But again, Kickstarter's a weird animal, and unless you really know how that system works and have experience with it, it's a really scary place to be. Like if you're just kind of doing it. Yeah.
And back then too, it was like the wild world of Kickstarter. You couldn't really rely upon others to give you advice. There weren't communities that you could come to or other creators, because everybody was learning. and this is the time frame where we had, like the Mike Nystals doing 3 consecutive or overlapping Kickstarters, and Kickstarter even saying, I don't see a problem with that, because nobody had really gotten a feel for it. I think a lot of it is trial and error, and somebody has to go through the trial and error for others to learn. So
yeah, shipping I think also is a big lesson with me. So with Tales from the Fallen Empire, I went in for international shipping, and I just imagine some nefarious, villainous Australian who basically said, we're just going to flood his Kickstarter with orders, so he has to spend $24 per book to ship to our country.
Yes.
It killed me. I went like $1,000 over what I had budgeted, just pretty much to ship to like Australia and Brazil, were like 2 of the huge like money grabbers for shipping.
And I think that Brazil is also infamous for lost packages.
Yep.
I've heard of that from people in Brazil who are kind of like, yeah, don't ship to me in Brazil. I've got a mailing address in a neighboring country, and when I go there twice a year, I'll pick it up. It's kind of like,
I can't think of his name, but he's a big supporter of the OSR. Maybe I want to say his name's Diego, but it may not be. But anyway, he always posts on Instagram, huge OSR person, but he actually bought a copy of my book, and even though it arrived in Brazil, it still took 2 weeks in customs before he could even get it.
nice. Not a corrupt system whatsoever. That's oh god. And it's funny too, because I've ordered stuff from, of all places, Finland with James Raggy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten stuff from, I live in New York City, but I've gotten stuff from James Raggy. One time, literally 48 hours after I ordered it, it was in my mailbox.
Wow.
And I was like, this, yeah. I mean, I have stuff that I've ordered from Goodman Games that will take a week and a half. I'm not bitching about it. I'm just remarking that sometimes you just can't figure out how the shipping goes.
No, exactly. But yeah, I've ordered many stuff from James as well. Actually, my shelf has a pretty decent size Lamentations of the Flame Princess collection on it. I actually wrote a book for James that's still sitting on a hard drive somewhere. It was called The Colony. And this is pretty much, I think, shortly after I wrote Tales from the Fallen Empire. So The Colony was supposed to be a weird fantasy based on Roanoke.
Oh.
And so I did the manuscript. I think it was in the 3rd revision, and I sent it to James, and he goes, it still doesn't have a weird quality to it.
It's fucking Roanoke. How much weirder you need to get than Roanoke? I'm sorry, just
and I think it was just mostly because he felt it was too linear, and there wasn't enough tables in it. And I sat and I messed around with it, and then I finally just shelved it. And then, last I heard that he was going into some problems and he was going to close shop, but I guess he didn't do that.
From what I understand is that he was, and I don't want to, he was many thousands of dollars, at least nearing 6 figures. He had debt coming up to the Finnish government. He had taken government loans out. They were coming due. The world of COVID hit him. The world of Zach Smith did his business. And he did a real push in the summertime. Basically, I've got new stuff coming out, and we need to raise, I don't know, I want to say like $100,000 to basically save it, to pay off the debt. And he raised enough that the business is still going. Although if you back for the ref book, you don't fucking know what's going on with that now. And I still remember when James put that up on Indiegogo and he set a date. And it's like, listen, the date I'm giving is bullshit date, because there's no way it's going to take this long for me to fulfill this. And now, years later, backers are still waiting for it. I suspect it's going to be really good, because the original ref book is something that I use as inspiration and as a resource in any game I run in the OSR. It is simply that good, and I don't throw comments like that out about anything. It really is spot on. Even if I don't necessarily use the system itself, the ref book is well worth any money spent. So hopefully, maybe in 2021 we'll get a sighting of the ref book.
Yeah, I backed that. I was one of the backers, but I think if it's anything close to what he did for the Grindhouse edition, which I also have, the box set,
yes,
where he wrote actually a really decent referee section. If it's anything like that, it's then well worth it.
Yeah, I have both box sets from James because they were just way. Even though I find most of the recent adventures, especially ones written by James, to be, dare I say, party fucks, they are presented well. They're well written. You can't bitch about the production quality at all. Just that a lot of them are simply unplayable. Maybe they're playable as a convention game, where whether the party lives or dies doesn't matter. But if you use it in your home campaign, your party will probably want to kill you afterwards, and I don't like to have my gaming group want to tar and feather me. So
I've ran the grinding gear before, and I will say that
that's excellent. By the way, that is like Tomb of Horrors that you can actually possibly, if you play it well, not just survive, maybe even beat it. But okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, no, my players purposely committed suicide in that adventure.
Oh,
my wife especially. There was one part where there's the obvious big red button in the dungeon, and she went and pressed it and went squish, and then like after that, everything else just kind of just fell apart. But
people get punch drunk at that. It's like, oh, and that was actually one of those inside jokes of like, you put stuff in there because the players shouldn't be turning all the levers. And I used to always hate that in the old TSR adventures. We had to randomly step on tiles that there was no rhyme or reason as to why you should, and failure to do so correctly would lead in like the ceiling falling. But if you got it right, you got your +2 ring of protection. And really, it wasn't like you were going to find a scrap of paper giving you the clue as to how to successfully do this. So short of, I don't know, bringing your pack mules into the dungeon and having them walk along until they died, it required literal sacrifices of not just party resources, but of player characters to often solve that. And it was never my cup of tea. So that was, I guess, James's inside joke. It's a big red button. You shouldn't push it. You know it. There's no reason to push it. There's no clue that says push it. No sign. It's like, yeah, but I'm a player. I gotta push the button. Oh my God. So now my question to you, and I'm guessing there's some similar background to us, because I was reading the page for your Anarchy Kickstarter, and your 80s sound a lot like my 80s, where it was going to Lemoore East or Lemoore's in Brooklyn or CBGB's, and seeing bands like the Ramones, and that was, I mean, my hair was maybe a little bit longer than it is at home, but I was probably the most or the least radical looking of my group of friends. We had the shaved heads, we had the long hair down to the waist. They all have real like shirt and tie jobs and major positions with major companies these days. But back in the day, we were on that edge, whether it was heavy metal or punk rock. That was our scene. So Anarchy looks like it is going to be something that embraces that. Where did the idea come from?
So pretty much what you're saying. So I grew up in the 80s. I was 16 in 1984, and those years were filled with going out to Chinatown, buying Wild Irish Rose for $1 because
Nice.
the owner of the store didn't care how old I was. And Chinatown was right next to Broadway.
You look like you could shave in a year or two, maybe. You're good enough. And your drinking age was 18 back then. So really, he said he was 22. I was good.
So yeah, so we used to go down to, myself, my friend Ophelia, and my friend Manuel. We used to go meet on Broadway and drink up on the stairs on Kearny Street. And then we had the Mabuhay Gardens, which was at one time in the 70s, it was a Filipino restaurant that ultimately became one of the well-known punk clubs of in San Francisco. Across the street was the Keystone, which bands like Metallica kind of got their start, and Megadeth and a lot of them. And then upstairs from Mabuhay was the On Broadway, which Dirk Dirksen, who was kind of the punk rock version of Bill Graham. So I think Bill Graham was also on the East Coast too, right? During that time?
I believe so. Never saw him, but I do actually remember seeing a poster or two slapped to a light pole in Manhattan when you were down by CBGB's, because you always had the upcoming bands and performers. They were like always plastered everywhere. Oh God. So
I definitely had embraced the punk scene. I kind of lived it in my teenage years. I believe it or not, I had an orange mohawk, leather jacket, the spikes. I even actually had to go to a different school during high school because they didn't quite understand my whole punk look. And I went out to a school out in the suburbs for high school that was a little bit more skate punk and whatever friendly. Okay. So, but anyway,
I see that.
But the music was intense. I mean, I love the Dead Kennedys. I was into, TSOL. God, in San Francisco had just an amazing collection of just independent punk bands that were in the Bay Area. And it just stuck with me. So let's move ahead to like a few months back, and my friend Jason Elliott, the head of TSR, he told me about ZineQuest because I had no idea what it was. And the first thing that clicked in my mind was I was a big fan of a magazine called Maximum Rock and Roll, which was kind of the punk scene that looked like someone Xeroxed the hell out of it and then stapled it together. It had like the kidnapper type letters across it to spell out everything. And when he said ZineQuest, that's the first thing that popped in my mind, is like an old punk scene. And ultimately, then I was just going, well, wouldn't it be neat just to do an old punk scene and just get that style and feel again, and do an RPG? And eventually, it wasn't even an RPG. I was like, I just want to do an old punk scene. And that's just like, maybe I should do a punk scene that's an RPG. So Anarchy was kind of born at that point.
Well, that's actually pretty cool. It looks like it's got a nice hook in it. Is that I remember as a kid in the late 70s and early 80s, and the current generation, that's not what I'm going to be talking about. You had to do the air raid drills in school, where the alarm would go off and you'd have to leave the classroom and line up in the hallway away from the glass, because we were still in the midst of this Cold War. And the Cold War was very hot. They might have said it was cold, but that you, as a kid, if you even watched the news occasionally, because again, back in that time frame, most people did not have cable. You watched what your parents were watching on the one TV, and that means, oh, okay, well now it's time for the evening news. Everybody sit down and listen to Walter Cronkite, and you see the latest events going on in the world. And it was always like, oh my God, is this going to lead to somebody pushing the fucking button? And what would happen? And you thought about it. Even as a teenager, you thought, it wasn't like today where I feel right now is COVID, but there's a certain security in what we have now compared to when you had two countries that were always ready to, as we thought, nobody wanted to be the person left out. Like, oh wait, they sent missiles and we didn't. All you need is one stupid mistake, and we live that. So to look at what your write-up is for Anarchy and see that default setting, and remember that time and that feeling, it is it's all I can read the description and go, I could have lived that. Thank God I didn't, but I could have.
Yeah, I mean, the fear of nuclear war at that time was real. And if, Gen Xers remember this the best, is that if you were basically of the brat pack age of, being in your teenage years in the 80s, you feared that either the Iranians were going to get us, the Russians were going to get us, Reagan was going to say one wrong thing, and suddenly we're going to get rained on. And then 1983, the day after, was put out on an ABC.
Oh my God, I forgot about that movie. Oh, jeez.
And that movie terrified me. So I would have to say almost a year after, I would lay awake and listen to my radio at night on my boombox and fall asleep just waiting to hear that emergency broadcast system thing come over the radio. And thank God it never did. But and you kind of said something about, fear of COVID today. That, I think, sure, we're afraid of it. We have preventions to get it. But there was a helplessness to the feeling that we had with that threat, because we had no control.
You had no control. And it could literally have been your first realization of what's happening would have been, hey, what's that light? Oh shit! I mean, it would be like there'd be nothing you could do. COVID, you can take precautions. Yes, it's fucked up the world. Yes, it's led to a lot of isolation and other issues, but it isn't like the idea of, wow, we have a nuclear war. The best option, I used to think when I was, back in the mid '80s, I was like, wow, the best option against nuclear war is that I live in New York City and I won't survive the first strike, which is probably the best, because you read fiction or you read Popular Science or one of the other magazines out there that would maybe have articles on it. You'd be like, oh, I don't want to be a survivor, because if you're a survivor, it's going to be even worse than if you were already dead. Shit.
So the city of San Francisco published a pamphlet in probably around that time, 83, 84. And it drew the Bay Area out, and it drew these rings. And it talked about, if you were in this ring, you would be instantly vaporized. If you were in this ring, you would probably be blind from the flash, even if you closed your eyes. And you would suffer radiation burns, and your lifespan would be blah, blah, blah. If you were in this ring, you had this % chance to not be blind and survive radiation. And it was weird. But it was an actual published pamphlet from the city of San Francisco that warned about what the effects would be if a bomb hit ground zero in San Francisco.
It is such again, people, my son's generation, my son is 28, and yes, he grew up with 9/11 happened. I still remember, I was working and coming by, and then he's giving me this drawing of force fields to protect the buildings, because this is, he had it planned out how we're going to protect against further planes crashing into the towers, and that was his reality. 9/11 was what he grew up with.
Yeah,
and 9/11 was I was down there. I reported to it. I was when the buildings came down. Scary ass shit. I still have. I don't want to say post-traumatic. I'm not saying I have PTSD, but I certainly think about it often. But if you were growing up in the 80s, and 70s, the 80s, this was on your mind constantly, because just like in some ways COVID is on the news all the time, this discussion was always being discussed on TV. The talking heads were always talking about, in the case of a nuclear war, take shelter. Nuclear blast, people used to have, in their backyards in certain areas, they'd have their own fallout shelters built. That's something else you could find in Popular Mechanics. Instructions on how to build your own shelter and stock it up, so you can wait out the nuclear winter that's going to happen. So, Anarchy really, when I read the write up on it on Kickstarter, I was like, again, I said, holy crap, this is, a woulda, coulda, thank God wasn't, but with the twist to it. And where did that twist come from?
So the twist just kind of came from me being a huge D&D nerd. So
I should have guessed.
So I thought about it and I was going, well, this could be kind of one of those grim, realistic sort of things where it's like, all right, we're going to wander the wastelands and fight other survivors. And I'm going, nah, I rather have, like Secret Service guys and demons and whatever else I can think of. So I kind of just took a little bit of a nod towards Gamma World when thinking about it, just kind of going with a gonzo post-apocalyptic feel. So in Anarchy, what ended up happening is those who survived were able to tap into what I'm calling the dark mana or anarchy, which is kind of the radiation changed people, mutated, caused this like weird energy thing to happen. So people manifest their anarchy in different ways. Some people might have gotten really strong from it. Some might have mutated into other creatures. Like I have an example in there called the Mole Men, which are mutants. Some people are actually able to take that radiation and create like a change reality, which is kind of more of a magic effect. So while yes, it's based on something that was real horrible that could have happened, it's more of kind of a weird, I don't know, post-apocalyptic gonzo fantasy version of that. So
okay. And I guess your core mechanic is extremely simple. You explained it on the Kickstarter page.
So, yeah, there's two ways of doing it. I call it the soft core and the hardcore. Soft core is really simple. You just basically pick the trait that you want to use. You roll the dice, and basically, depending on rolling low is really good, and you only need one die to be really low. So if you're rolling 3 dice, one of those dice is a 1, a 5, and a 6. You rolled a 1, you did really well. Okay. If you roll like a 4, 5, and a 6 on those 3 dice, then yeah, you failed. And I have like a little chart that kind of outlines it. So it's just simple. You need to resolve something really quick. Grab your trait, roll it. If you get a low number, you're awesome. The hardcore is more of based on a threshold. So there's 2 ways of doing it. You're going to use your trait as with the softcore version. However, when you roll the dice, you're going to basically keep track of certain successes because that's going to build up the anarchy or the dark mana. And ultimately, as you're rolling, you're going to build up this larger pool of dice that you can use. So while your trait might be 3, depending on what you're doing, you might end up with 6 additional dice to roll. And how you do that is simply based on so if I'm going to go up and punch somebody, that's going to be my 3 dice. However, if I'm going to go up and punch somebody with brass knuckles, that's going to be an extra dice. If I'm flying off of a bar while using brass knuckles, so now I have brass knuckles, which is 1 die, flying off the bar is 2. And as I build a narrative around what I'm doing, I'm just going to keep stacking extra dice on there. But in order for me to do that, I have to be creative and just continuously add to that scene. Otherwise, sure, if I want to be boring and punch somebody, I got my trait. If I want to be really cool and describe to the game master what I'm doing in this epic tale of how I'm doing it, I'm going to continue to stack extra dice. So my dice pool is going to be massive. And then I'm going to roll those dice and, add up the successes and try to beat a threshold. Or if it's contested, and obviously, mooks or goons or whatever you want to call them are pretty simple. You just kind of overcome a threat with them. But what I call the big bads, are basically built like characters. So the GM and the player are just going to go on this like narrative, I don't know, war just to build up dice pools in order to just go at it.
That's a pretty interesting way to handle that. And it sounds like it should play fairly fast and loose, which is another fun thing to do. And that's nice. And there's as I'm thinking about it, it sounds like a fun game for conventions because it really allows players to push the limits of the system without the concern of will I survive to play the next session, or am I going to get, you push it and you go all out, and that's fun. And the ability as a GM to decide how deep you're going to go with the rules allows you to reflect that on your gaming group. We all know our gaming groups. We know how deep they want to go. So I like that option.
Yeah, and the one thing I like about, going to OSR versus modern is a lot of modern is all preset and prepackaged. So sure, you can do things when you choose it from the list, but I'm someone who just really doesn't like to choose things from lists. I like to be able to say, all right, this is what I'm going to do in this scene, and either the game master is going to let me do it or they're not going to. And that's what I built it around. So the more wild, crazy stuff that you can throw out there on your character's action, the bigger a dice pool you can build.
I like that. That does again. That's more of the rulings, not rules type of OSR feel to it, and that is cool.
Yeah, and also I've been lucky enough, so I kind of picture this as an OSR project, even though it's not particularly built around, old D&D or anything like that. It's kind of its own system, but I even want because honestly, I started gaming in the early 80s, and like the Mulvey Cook box set was like my first D&D game.
Okay.
So my experiences were with that style of gaming. So I was lucky enough to be able to bring on James V. West and
good artist,
and James Hansen, who did some stuff for Barbarians of the Ruined Earth.
Okay.
As artists on this. So it's also going to have a very cartoony and OSR-y sort of feeling to the artwork that's going to be in there as well.
Okay, that's spot on. Damn.
Yeah.
Now,
and then the rest of it's going to look like old punk posters. So that's, so it'll be a mixture. Yeah.
See, that sells to me pretty much perfectly because, I never would have gotten away with spiked hair, so that's why I kind of went with the long unkempt hair and the silver chains. Although I was more of the flannel at the time. My God, I own too many flannel fucking shirts. Because you were that period too was trying to find your identity while identifying with this nebulous, not movement, but this community that was punk and metal and hard rock, and it all kind of overlapped. And whereas you'd have your one friend who would wear, the leather with, all the metal attachments to it. Then you'd have the other with sometimes, the spiked hair and always wearing the shirts with no sleeves on it. I was I guess almost the grunge look, I guess we would say now. I never thought about that. Oh, geez, I'm 53 and I was doing the grunge look back in the 80s on the East Coast, not even in Seattle. Jeez. But I'm looking forward to this. This sounds like a lot of fun. And just, again, the setting itself, I can't call it nostalgia, or I can, but it's nostalgia for something that, thank God, never happened.
Yeah.
But I was sure would, if that makes any sense.
No, I think anyone of our age range was convinced that the bomb was going to drop at any point. And it wasn't like the 50s or the 60s either, where there was this delusion of of duck and cover, where it's just like, oh, atomic bomb, I'll just go and hide under my desk and I'll be completely fine. I'll cover my eyes.
Right. It's like, yeah, no big whoop. They'll have these new helicopters in to deliver food and water real quickly. Or, hey, your subways are your bomb shelter. No, they're not.
Yeah, the 80s was more kind of like, yeah, no, if the bomb hits, you're going to be dead. So, you know, you can, go wait in the hallway, whatever, but that's where you'll die.
Yeah. No. I used to think about that with because my school was built in like, I think like the 1930s, or it was like pre-World War II. So it was glass everywhere. And even with the fire doors had glass above them to let light through. And I was always thinking, wow, but if a bomb, if it was a big enough blast, and again, it wasn't a bomb because this would be an atomic bomb, so you weren't in that initial, you were just getting hit with the shock, the force. I was like, if it blows out the windows of the classroom, isn't it going to blow out the pressure? Isn't that going to blow out the glass in these hallways? Doesn't it kind of defeat the purpose to put us in a hallway? I was like, I'd be better off under my desk. But we didn't hide under desks. You had to do these. And we also had fire drills. I will say we had those. But no, we also had these air raid bomb drills. Like the Soviets were going to drop a conventional bomb on the outer borough of Queens. It wasn't going to happen. Wow. So now, James, do you have any other projects lined up? Out of curiosity, since we have you here.
Right now, I'm looking at a couple of things that I want to get accomplished. So I have two adventures for Top Secret New World Order that need to get finished, but it's just been kind of 2020 wasn't a really great year for the I don't know how to put it, for excitement of doing anything other than just kind of moping. So
yeah, it was hard to focus in 2020. I will say that. Yeah, 2020. If I could take a year and just say goodbye, erase you from memory, we should have all have been in a coma for 2020 and just rebooted in 2021. Is my feeling.
A couple of things that I'm really excited about, though, that I want to make happen this year are so one is a project called Tools of Magic, which I've been working on, since probably around 2007, which I refer to as Wicca Punk, which is a setting where it's pagan superheroes.
Oh.
So that's kind of one of the things that I've been playing around with for a while. And the second one is pretty much I need to get done, or Jen Brinkman will probably drive out here to Connecticut and beat me senseless, which is Tales from the Fallen Empire 2nd edition.
Oh, nice. Yes. Again, Tales from the Fallen Empire, an excellent setting book. And dare I say, I guess, and if you're gonna do a 2nd edition on that, dude, I'm almost loath to say this. You might want to do DCC and 5e. God, I hate saying that.
No, don't, because right now I am on this like really weird fence of how I want to do it. I mean, it'll definitely be DCC again, but whether I do a 5e conversion in it, or there's another system that I'm very, very fond of called Barbarians of Lumeria.
I remember that. I have a print copy somewhere on my shelf.
Which is a beautiful system done by Simon Washbourne. And the only reason I was actually going to do a version of it at the time, but one, I just didn't really want to do a conversion, and two, Simon's fees for using the system, because it was a licensed system at the time, were just a little too high. So it's just kind of like, well, maybe not. But DCC, so on the fence about 5e, because 5e right now is kind of the popular, like all the cool kids play it sort of thing.
It's the rising tide that lifts all ships. Because of course, the other option is to write the core book as system neutral, and then have supplements for DCC for the parts that need rules or 5e.
Midgard, Kobold Press does that with their Midgard setting, where the core campaign book is system neutral, and then there's the 5e Heroes book, and then
Right.
there's also the Pathfinder's Heroes book.
And there's a Swords and Wizardry supplement for that too.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yes.
So that's probably a good way to look at it. Is because I mean 5e is probably still going to remain popular for a while, but when I look at things like Deadlands D20 and kind of cringe at the fact that they thought that this was a good, and I think even Shane Henley at some point had said that that wasn't the greatest or brilliantest of ideas to do a Deadlands D20 version, because ultimately it just, it failed on so many levels. But and that's my biggest fear is, you go out and say, all right, cool, I just made this for 5e, and then, something happens, or 5e is no longer the little darling of role players anymore, and then suddenly it just kind of falls into this obscure thing.
Well, it's funny because even with like the Lost Land setting for Frog God games, and I love the Lost Lands, when they finally put out the the reference book, the hardcover, it was system neutral. So you can take it and you could run anything from Swords and Wizardry to 5e to Pathfinder to GURPS with it, because if you're going to be playing 5e or I think even Pathfinder, there are supplements for it that add the crunch in. But let's be honest, I mean, how much crunch do you need in a setting book generally? So I think that the option of going system neutral, and hey, you could even license out the system specific to other creators if you wanted to. Sure, you want to write it there, you do the work. I'll just sit back and enjoy the results.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many great systems out there. Savage Worlds is one I know I enjoy a lot. It's Green Ronin published Fantasy Age a few years back, which is another system that I absolutely love, but never can find anyone who wants to play it. So
I devoured that when it initially came out as was it Dragon Age?
Yep.
I was just like, oh, I that first box set, I was like, wow, there's just so much I could do with this. It just was very inspirational. But then again, I'm somebody that still looks back at Green Ronin's True 20 and their settings and settings for that. And I really should just go back and see if I can rip those settings away from True 20 and use it with the OSR rule set of my choice, because I love the settings. They were short settings, but they were inspirational. Maybe the system itself wasn't perfect, but the material that went along with it was damn good.
Yeah, they did one called Damnation Decade, which I was very fond of, which was kind of a 70s-esque sort of thing that they did.
So those are all options.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, I don't think anybody but Goodman Games has done settings for DCC aside from you. I can't think of any.
There's like Under the Broken Moon.
Which kind of goes, you can call classic. It's kind of, but the fantasy side, Under a Broken Moon is kind of the weird. It's Sword and Planet, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think it's more like Thunder the Barbarian.
Yeah. 80s cartoons for those of us. But and you have that, and you have Darker Trails, which just got renamed, but that's Western. But for a fantasy type of default ability setting, I don't think there is one. Not even from Goodman. They've put out settings, but they don't. You can't go, okay, well, this could be any sword and sorcery type setting. They really don't. You have it. You seem to have that niche to yourself. So
yeah. So second edition is something that has been on my mind, because there's a whole other continent. There's different changes that obviously after I published the initial setting, I read over it again. And I'm going, I could have did this so much better, or I really didn't describe this part yet, or so So there's a lot more that can be done with it. A lot more stories to tell.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to it because
Awesome.
I really enjoyed the first edition, and now you got me thinking. I'm thinking of I should pull that off my shelf and maybe do the good old convert on the fly and run it with Swords and Wizardry, or as an inspiration, because it was just a lot of fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome, James. Thank you. I really I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on and yap with me. Normally, we get a chance to catch up at various conventions, but yeah, we haven't had that opportunity in 2020.
Yeah, I'm hoping Game Hole happens. That would be so awesome just to go to a live convention at the end of the year.
You're not the first person that said that I've actually sat down with. And it's like, like, are you going to be at Game Hole? I'm like, well, if there is a Game Hole, I'll be at Game Hole because Rach loves Game Hole, and we'll never miss a Game Hole. Game Hole is just so well run.
It is.
It is like a Swiss clock mechanism or Swiss watch mechanism. There's never a hiccup. Everything is spot on, and if you need to find Alex, you can find Alex. He's never so overwhelmed that you can't find him. You might not be able to grab much of his time, but you can grab him.
No, absolutely.
Well, James, again, thank you. Folks that are listening at home, you've probably listened to 2 firesides today because I did 2 today. And tomorrow I have at 11 a.m. Frank Tuffler, The Lair of the Manticore, and at 8 p.m. we have Nathan Robert, 13th Fleet, and I think there's 2 more on Wednesday with Lloyd Metcalf in the morning and Tom Wilson joining myself and Bad Mike in the evening. We have the Fireside. If you want anything to know about ZineQuest, you're going to find him here. All right. On that note, we're going to punch out. Later, folks.
Goodbye.
Folks, again, thank you. I appreciate the support. The creators appreciate the support. And this wouldn't be possible without all of you, the listeners. So, again, thank you. Be safe, be well. God bless each and every one of you. Roll those dice and roll them well. And knock on wood, I'm back tomorrow with 2 more firesides. Later, folks.